Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. The government's released its plan to get our defence infrastructure back up to scratch, some of which hasn't been touched in decades. The Defence Estate Portfolio sets out how $2.5 billion will be spent over the next 15 years. At the same time, the Future Naval Base Programme is pinned at $4 billion over 35 years. It's being called a generational investment in defence infrastructure. But given the horror stories we've heard about black mould, infestations and asbestos plaguing NZDF-owned buildings, will this all be enough? Today on The Front Page, Associate Minister of Defence and Minister for Building and Construction, Penk, is with us to dive into an area that's been chronically underinvested in for far too long. So, Chris, the Defence Estate comprises of about 4,700 buildings across 9 main camps and bases, 2 large training areas and a number of regional support facilities. Last year, the total land and building value was pinned about $4.7 billion. So over 70% of that infrastructure, I see, now has a less than 20 years of remaining useful life, with 14% already beyond its useful life. Is $2.5 billion over the next 15 years going to be enough?
Well, we think it will, but, we'll need to consider how it looks as we go along. And, of course, the changing needs of the Defence Force. Some of it's, thinking about the way that technological changes will dictate what our Defence Force looks like. It might be more drones or unmanned aerial vehicles or actually vessels as well, thinking about replacing the Navy fleet as we're doing. And, of course, that it has implications for whether you have wharves or and runways and other structures. So as far as we can tell now, it's the right plan. But as part of the general Defence Capability Plan review every 2 years, we know that we'll need to monitor to see how effective that spend is as time goes forward.
Yeah, and of those 4,700 roughly, how much of that is housing?
Yeah, a large proportion is housing. Defence housing is an important element. Of course, it's crucial for the well-being of the men and women who serve in uniform in the Defence Force and our Defence Force civilians, I should add, in terms of conditions more generally. But therefore, it goes to morale and retention. So actually, in a funny way, it's operational, even housing and other accommodations such as barracks and the dining facilities and so on. So I've been really careful, and so has the Defence Minister Judith Collins, and in fact the whole government, to make sure we understand the impact of the underinvestment over the years. In these kinds of areas, as well as the platforms, the helicopters, the ships, the planes, because we know that it's all connected, because we're not going to have a good Defence Force unless we continue to have great people in it.
Yeah, I've read some horror stories actually about some of the Defence Force housing. You've got tenants that have talked about leaky houses, black mould, asbestos, lack of heating. The list goes on, infestations. Is this something that you've heard as well?
Yeah, I've heard it and I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've walked into some of these places literally with a mask on, which I thought might have been overkill until I saw and felt and actually smelt the effect of black mould, for example, Papakura, where we have some of our finest soldiers headquartered, just totally unsuitable conditions for any living creature, frankly, but including and especially our Defence Force personnel, from whom we ask so much, and the families of them too. If you think about the sacrifices that are made by the partner and the kids of a serving sailor, soldier, aviator, as the case may be, especially spending long periods of time away from home. They might be living out of the city that they have grown up in and building their life. So the onus is on us, I think, very clearly morally as well as legally, to provide a much better than some of these awful conditions that, yes, I've seen and also heard about from our people.
Have you any idea how much, roughly even, how many defence houses are sitting out there just not usable and just empty?
Well, if you have been put aside in that way, I'm less interested, if I may say, then in that question, than those that continue to be used because we need them, but are really to some extent subpar. Now, technically, they've all got the healthy homes standard that has been met, but that doesn't mean they're very livable, particularly if you think about poorly designed or maybe simply not suitable for the modern family living needs, and again, just going to the point of it to look after our people from whom we ask so much. So, there are different categories. Some are frankly uninhabitable, and those have been set aside. But the new build program, as well as the maintenance of the existing stock, is bearing in mind certainly that there are unsatisfactory situations in which people are still living today.
Right, so if I'm a family and my husband or wife is a part of the Defence Force and I'm living in one of these substandard houses, how long will I have to wait until everything's up to scratch, do you think, or whether I'm in a dry house or something?
Yeah, it's a rolling wall approach, so it'd be hard to average out, but at different bases and camps across the country, we've already been doing the work, and to be fair, it's been acknowledged for a few years now, and including under the last couple of successive governments, but the reality is it's been decades in the making, this problem, and therefore it'll be decades in the making of the solution, but I know that we've got to start somewhere, and certainly, some of that renewal and replacement has been underway, and I'm really excited that the announcement that we've made just now will give a really clear way ahead for people to feel confident that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
What's the quickest way to get your military spend into 2% of GDP so we can say we're doing our bit, go and waste $2 billion on 5 helicopters? You say what?
No, that's rubbish. What's different on the defence plan is that in the past you'd have people say we're going to do all this stuff, but there was no money associated with the investments. We've got a really clear plan for 15 years of the capabilities and the skills we want to build into the Defence Force in New Zealand that will then plug in well with the Australians and other defence partners. And what's unique here is we've put spending associated with that. So we will spend $12 billion over the next 4 years.
Right, so all of this is a part of the Defence Capability Plan, and that was released earlier this year. That promises $12 billion of funding over the next 4 years, including $9 billion of new spending. I see you've said that the 2.5 earmarked for this strengthening this infrastructure over the next 4 years is subject to annual budget processes. Does that mean that could change? Could it get less, or could it potentially get more?
Well, the Defence Capability Plan overall could get more, so it's being reviewed every 2 years for that in purpose. In terms of the infrastructure, my expectation is that it would be the same or potentially higher, but we should be able to, operate in a way that provides certainty, including on a cost basis for taxpayers. But also I think the key point is that we need to do as much as we can within that window and be smart about how we do it. So a lot of it's actually prioritising within all the different needs, all of which are pressing, all of which are important in their own way. So that's going to be the skill, I think, over the next few years is prioritising effectively and actually also delivering. Because of course it's all very well to put the money aside, but what that means in terms of the budget processes that still need to take place is individual projects will be assessed and agreed by the government of the day as we go along.
Right, and you've got that 2.5 in the kitty just so things can get moving and approved quickly. In terms of that announcement earlier this year, I believe it was called the Defence Estate Regeneration Programme. Has that been switched up, and that's what we're talking about now, the updated version of that? The
Defence Estate Regeneration Programme, or DERP, and the Defence loves a good acronym, just like government in general does, is an aspect. It's one of a few different elements within the Defence Estates Property Programme more generally. So the DEP is within the DERP, which in turn fits within the DCP. So, just about got the whole alphabet going, but it's part of it. So the Defence Estate Regeneration Programme is saying, well, we need ongoing maintenance, and that can be funded through depreciation, and it's kind of business as usual, but ongoing. Whereas the announcement that we've made more recently is actually saying that there are large injections of capital on a really strategic basis and making decisions, for example, that actually we want to have the Navy remain in Devonport Naval Base in North Shore of Auckland for, the next generation or so. Because, of course, if you don't have that big scale commitment of funding and also some of those decisions locked in, then there's no point in doing anything more than just the routine maintenance to keep them going, frankly.
All right, so are you expecting by 2040 for all of the Defence Force housing to be livable and no mould, no heating issues, no infestations, nothing?
I would certainly hope and expect it would actually be much sooner than that. And as I say, the work's been ongoing already. And, the officials who have been undertaking that work and Defence Force itself deserve credit for that. But we do need to move as quickly within the window between now and 2040 to do all that. I think the window of the next 15 years reflects that there are some large-scale projects, if you're thinking about wharves and runways and other major facilities that simply can't be knocked together in 18 months to 2 years, a la housing. So that's going to be where some of that medium to long-term work needs to take place.
Right, now I know in opposition you kind of get a general idea, a general consensus about what everything looks like. But as soon as you picked up that Associate Defence and, of course, the veterans portfolios as well, and you saw the actual numbers and the state of some of this infrastructure, what was your first thoughts?
Well, my first thought is that we're failing our service personnel. I think it's a legal and a moral obligation, certainly in the veteran space, and there are things that we can talk about how we can do better to recognise and also provide entitlements to those former service personnel. But I was certainly shocked by just how bad things have become. Actually, it was a quarter of a century ago that I joined the Navy in New Zealand myself, so at Devonport, where we've made this week's announcement about the future of that naval base, as well as the infrastructure more generally. That gave me an insight to how things were back in the year 2000, and I'm sad to say that things aren't any better. In fact, somewhat worse than that. So I had an insight, and as you say, in opposition, it's possible to get a feel for how things are, but it had been worse than I had expected or hoped when we came into the role of government a couple of years ago.
Right, so when you visit Devonport, can you see something? Does it just look exactly the same?
It's changed in a few different ways, and there have been some good investments made over a period of time, but it's also a large footprint. For example, there's the officer training school up on Narrowneck Beach, a bit further up on that same part of the North Shore, where I spent a bit of time. That's been, effectively replaced by Portacom buildings there. You've got sea training areas that are now quite frequently underwater, and a certain amount of that's just environmental change due to, sea level rise and other factors. So, more or less, if you were to squint, you could see it's more or less the same, and that's a problem in itself to the extent that investment is needed, but also things are just a little bit more aged and tired after 25 years, and also bearing in mind that things had been pretty bad back in the day, even then.
Well, I read this quote, a large proportion of the defence estate was built over 80 years ago during World War II. Now, that seems wild.
It does seem wild, doesn't it? Yeah. The housing, just to go back to that, a lot of that's 60 years old. And of course, you can have an old house that's been well maintained and improved over the years, but a lot of them have not been. If you think about World War II and the significance of the fact that then we understood really clearly the importance of national security, and truth be told, I think successive governments in the intervening years, of both political stripes, by the way, it's not a partisan point that I make, have underinvested, because it's easy to kick the can down the road when it comes down to the trade-off of schools and hospitals that are in our respective areas of the country. That's really immediate. Of course, it's important, but the regional security in the South Pacific, even in our relative backyard, that's still over the horizon, literally out of sight, out of mind. And then, of course, you've got the defence spaces that are not visible to the general public, precisely because they're set aside as areas of restriction behind the wire. And so if you add those things together, it's little wonder, but not excusable or justifiable nevertheless, that defence has taken a backward step in terms of the investment that's been placed in it.
Yeah, how many homes or barrack beds have been taken out of use because they were just unsafe or below standard?
I don't have the actual number, but it's a real shame that we've had to have any in that category. Again, I go back to the situation in Papakura with the particular barrack block that I can picture and almost, relive as though I was walking in it now with that black mould situation. So
5 barrack blocks, I think, at Papakura.
Yeah. Certainly, it's unacceptable that we should get to the point where any need to be retired almost on an emergency basis. So we're aiming to have a program going forward that doesn't get to that state where we need to, act, reactively, so to speak, in those situations, and actually to have a positive, proactive maintenance program going forward, and also, think about the replacement that's naturally going to be needed over time.
What is it like for personnel living inside these houses? Horrible. I mean, in the government's own briefing papers, it states the healthy homes is a minimum standard and still won't improve current poor conditions, leaving them unfit for modern living. Yet here we are. We are still living in these homes. We are still living with mould, asbestos. Our kids are getting sick, adults are getting sick, to the point where our tamariki are being hospitalised, they're being taken away in ambulances because of those ongoing respiratory problems, those asthmatic problems that all of these this condition of the homes leaves people with.
I know that some families have been vocal in the media, especially in the last few years, about the living conditions. Have the families and those actually living in these places been consulted as part of this plan?
Yeah, I've been in a lot of contact with Defence Force families, including service personnel themselves. So, and that's going to be an ongoing effort. I want to know that the changes that we're making and the investment that we're making is actually going to work for them. So, yes, to get to this point, I've sat down and listened to families, but particularly service personnel who also can speak on behalf of their families because they get it, better than anyone, of course, when there's pressure from the partner or the spouse or the family. But certainly, there's got to be an ongoing discussion. It's not a one and done. This week's announcement isn't the end of it, and sort of walk away. It's actually to understand how that's playing out in real life for these people.
This is the third plan since 2016. Hey, are we going to get another plan in a couple of years' time? Or is it just, when you peel off the surface, it's like getting worse and worse the deeper you go?
Yeah, I think the closer you look, the more that you see. And there's also been an element that over time, of course, things do deteriorate. It's the natural wear and tear in the way of things. So I think we could continue to review until the cows come home and we'd simply find that things aren't getting better. But to do something about it, I think what it should look like and does look like in 2025 is doing some immediate things that are desperately needed, also having a long-term plan, setting aside the funds, and then committing to not getting in that scenario again. And it's certainly what we're aiming to do as a government with today's announcement.
And I suppose as well the significant input of funding into Devonport really gives that area certainty that it's there to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important for the local area, but it's important for the Defence Force and particularly the Navy. If you think about decisions that need to be made for them in the way that they train, and live. I mean, it's also important, by the way, that we're open-minded about opportunities elsewhere. And, it might be further north in the North Island where other port facilities are, that there could be some opportunities up there as well. But to say that we're going to have a future for the Navy and Devonport for the foreseeable future means that we can make those investments without second-guessing whether they're going to be throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, obviously you served as well. You were in uniform. How does that experience shape what you think about and deal with personnel today? And what do you make of retention? I mean, did I read correctly that you went over to Aussie and were part of the Australian Defence Force at one stage? How did they get you over there? Are they still doing it?
Yeah, well, I did join the New Zealand Navy as a good Kiwi lad, in fact, from Auckland, so it wasn't even that far just to go across the bridge and spend a bit of time in Devonport. But I joined the Australian Navy actually because they have submarines, and that was an area that I was keen to get into, so I did spend a bit of time in the submarine squadron before coming back to New Zealand.
Right, so do we need submarines?
Well, I mean, we could well have underwater vessels, but of an unmanned nature, I think is probably the most realistic way that we could achieve that. So those decisions are a really exciting part of the Defence Capability Plan, and more particularly something called Maritime Fleet Renewal, which I'm responsible for. I've got that delegation from the Defence Minister, Judith Collins. So I'm really enjoying myself thinking about, what that could look like or should look like in the future. And, if you think about the military applications, but obviously also search and rescue, fisheries protection, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. There are a lot of things that we expect our Navy and our Defence Force to do. So trying to make some smart decisions that enable us to have all those capabilities is the work that we're currently engaged in.
And in terms of attrition and rates, are we finding that a lot of young people are wanting to get into the force?
We are actually, and it's really pleasing to me that that's the case. And I know that the Defence Minister herself is also really gratified about that. Some of it is actually saying, well, if a young person or a mid-career Kiwi decides to join, they want something different. They're doing that to serve their country. They do, frankly, want operational experience There are lots of things that we can do and are doing to send them, in some cases, into harm's way, but other times just to give them a life in work that they could not have if they were to remain as a civilian in New Zealand. So the key is to retain these good people in an economic environment where job opportunities are more constrained elsewhere. Traditionally, we do see that as an easier time to recruit. So obviously we'll need to, make sure we even out through the economic cycle. But I think as well, if people can see that the government is committed to providing them with the facilities that they need to live, work, train, and ultimately, if necessary, to fight, then that's a powerful motivating factor as well.
Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Chelsea.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.